Hello my friends, thank you for tuning into this frequency again. It's your host Jason, and I've got a moment to myself and I thought I'd just take this opportunity to make a quick little video that I've been intending to do for a while. We're going into Wikipedia. The actual subject of this little video is Depersonalization Disorder, which I've talked about briefly a couple of times. And I was reading the Wikipedia article the other evening and I just want to go through it. And I'm going to make the distinction, I'm going to make the difference between what the mainstream medical people who are editing this article, and indeed the mainstream medical students who are editing articles like this, what they are telling you is happening in your mind, and what I'm saying, because I've just chosen to see my experience differently. And I'm receiving information from within, from without, and I see this very differently. So we're going to go through the article and I'm just going to explain it the way I see it. Depersonalization disorder, also known as depersonalization/derealization disorder, is a mental disorder in which the person has persistent or recurrent feelings of depersonalization or derealization. Depersonalization is described as feeling disconnected or detached from one's self. Individuals experiencing depersonalization may report feeling as if they are an outside observer of their own thoughts or body, and often report feeling a loss of control over their thoughts of actions. In some cases, individuals may be unable to accept their reflection as their own, or they may have out-of-body experiences. Derealization is described as detachment from one's surroundings. Individuals experiencing derealization may report perceiving the world around them as foggy, dreamlike, surreal, or visually distorted. In addition to these depersonalization/derealization disorder symptoms, the inner turmoil created by the disorder can result in depression, self-harm, low esteem, phobias, panic attacks, and even suicide. It's a pretty good description of a spiritual awakening right there. So a lot of people, more so now than ever before, just ordinary, regular Joes and Janes who have no spiritual leanings whatsoever, I fall into that category, and no religious history, no history of praying to God or anything like this. You just spontaneously start to experience the kind of things we're talking about here. And depending on where you go to get help with figuring out what the fuck is happening to me, you might go to a doctor and get labelled with depersonalization disorder. You may go onto YouTube and start watching videos like mine and go, I'm having a spiritual awakening. That's exactly what I did. I went onto YouTube. The first guy I found was Ralph Smart, and Teal Swan was another one. Tim Sheaf, Billy Hartbeing, and more recently Devin Maggi as well. These are guys who've done a great deal through telling their own stories to help me to figure out the experience that I'm having. Yeah, disconnected or detached from oneself, that's a classic sign of a spiritual awakening. You disidentify from the ego identity, which is basically take a sheet of paper, put your name at the top, and then write down everything you associate with that name. It's just the character you're playing in this incarnation. You're actually something supra-dimensional. Okay, we're in the physical dimension, but you're something which is outside of that physical dimension of space and time. Just through thinking about it, we're connecting with it. You don't necessarily need to meditate, pray, fast, anything like this. It's coming in, but all of those things can help you maybe to feel a stronger connection. Again, it's just a lens that can help you to focus the experience. Depersonalization/derealization disorder is thought to be caused largely by interpersonal trauma such as childhood abuse. Triggers may include significant stress, panic attacks, and drug use. Who among us doesn't have interpersonal trauma? Who can honestly put up their hand and say that they never had difficulty with their parental relationships, with their sibling relationships, when they went to school, with friends, with relationships? You know, I've described it as a frequency of a negative experience that you had in your formative years. Even if you then grow up and you quote unquote get over it, you just bury it in the subconscious. It's still there like a flywheel. It still has that momentum. And if an experience with a similar frequency manifests in a present day relationship, all of the baggage, all of the weight of that spinning flywheel just engages with this new experience, and all of a sudden a seemingly minor event in your present life can come with all of this momentum that has been been just waiting there for years. Diagnostic criteria for depersonalization derealization disorder include, among other symptoms, persistent or recurrent feelings of detachment from one's mental or bodily processes or from one's surroundings. Just thinking, these thoughts are not me, these thoughts are not mine. They're not. They are not you. You know, for me, it's the complete opposite. You stop numbing yourself. You, as uncomfortable as it may be, you go into these thoughts, you go into these feelings, and you accept that there is no going back. Things are never going to be the same. The way out is through. It's to a new place where you accept the truth of what you are. And I think the way that most people approach it is, especially when you get a label like this, and especially when you take that mainstream route, it's like no one sees this as a positive thing, or that any positive thing can come out of it down the line. It's like we want to go back. We want to go back to the way things were when it was comfortable. And I've watched people talking on YouTube, vloggers talking about their experience with this disorder and saying, oh, you know, I'm 90% back to how I was. You know, I'm still a little bit weird every now and then. It's like you've just suppressed it, but you can't ever fully put the genie back in the lamp once it's been rubbed. Do you know what I mean? While depersonalization derealization disorder was once considered rare, lifetime experiences with it occur in about 1 to 2% of the general population. So that they're saying that's no longer considered rare. That's quite a lot of people. You know, a lot of people are waking up. Not everybody's waking up in this way. Not everybody's being diagnosed. I mean, I'm one of the people who, if I did go to a doctor and talk about the experience I was having, I may well be diagnosed with depersonalization derealization disorder. The disorder is only diagnosed when these symptoms cause substantial distress or impair social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. I haven't had a proper job for 4 or 5 years, maybe. You might just about be able to get away with calling what I do part-time work, but I've had other more important things to do. It's just I'm going to call it an unfortunate quirk of society, that if you're not working in the conventional sense, somehow you're not considered to be functioning correctly or contributing to society. And you can see, just by me saying that, that's how I choose to see my situation, rather than having my occupational area of functioning impaired. That tells you everything you need to know about this. It's just a switch in perception. Am I struggling to fit in here, or am I breaking out of the mold? Okay, symptoms. The core symptoms of depersonalization derealization disorder are the subjective experience of unreality in oneself, because we're realizing that the self is illusory. Detachment from one's surroundings, certainly, yes. You want to get the hell out of wherever it is you are. You want to get out there to the woods. You want to be out there as far away from Wi-Fi and electricity and plumbed in water and all that. And we hear a lot of people with stories like this nowadays. People who are diagnosed with depersonalization also experience an urge to question and think critically about the nature of reality and existence. It results in significant distress. There's a playlist on my channel called My Frequencies Documentaries, and that is pretty much an expression of an urge to question and think critically about the nature of reality and existence. But how is that a bad thing? How is that a disorder, to question and think critically about the nature of reality and existence? That's just philosophy, isn't it? It's an interest in metaphysics. It's just questioning the established ideas that society is running on and that individuals are running on. I call that a healthy interest, personally. These experiences, which strike at the core of a person's identity and consciousness, may cause a person to feel uneasy or anxious. Yeah, certainly. It's a difficult thing to deal with, but you're letting go of a false identity, which in a way keeps you trapped. That's how I've come to see it. And what you're doing is you're waking up to a much greater, much more expansive understanding of yourself and this experience, and how we are one and the same with it. And so it's saying, yes, it causes a person to feel uneasy or anxious, but it's like that concept that Eckhart Tolle gave us, where he said, I can't live with myself. Who in that sentence is I, and who is myself? Well, myself is the person, and the person's going to feel uneasy or anxious because it is the part of you that is being exposed somehow. And the realization is that you are not that person. You are not the persona. The persona is just a mask that we wear. And we truly are the I in that sentence. I can't live with myself. Factors that tend to diminish symptoms are comforting personal interactions, intense physical or emotional stimulation and relaxation, distracting oneself, which is critical. By engaging in conversation or watching a movie, for example, may also provide temporary relief. Well, I hate watching movies. Like, I feel uncomfortable when I watch a TV show or a movie because I'm constantly thinking, what are they trying to make me think? What are they trying to make me feel? I can't even watch a program like Friends and just switch off and just enjoy it for what it is. There's always a subtext there. It's like, what was the scriptwriter thinking when they wrote this scene? Some other factors that are identified as relieving symptom severity are diet and or exercise, while alcohol and fatigue are listed by some as worsening their symptoms. Now that's a big divergence for me, because I would say that alcohol is the number one means in Western society by how we keep a lid on these kind of things. You know, nothing shuts down your higher functioning like alcohol, right? It just completely closes down a person's mental capacity and just puts you in such a low vibratory state. The exact cause of depersonalization is unknown. It's a spiritual awakening, guys, come on. The most common immediate precipitators of the disorder are severe stress, major depressive disorder, and panic, and hallucinogen ingestion. Well, there's a massive correlation between people taking large doses of hallucinogenic substances and having spiritual awakenings. People who live in highly individualistic cultures may be more vulnerable to depersonalization due to threat hypersensitivity and an external locus of control. That's quite interesting. I'm not entirely sure what they're talking about there. So threat hypersensitivity could come from not having a deeply seated sense of being that comes from within yourself, but instead identifying with this transient false ego identity. And obviously there's always people trying to tell you who you should be, what you need to do to be somebody, what you need to achieve. Advertising trying to sell you this and that. You need to have this to make it in society, to be worth something. An external locus of control. The degree to which people believe that they have control over the outcome of events in their lives. One of the key threads of a spiritual awakening is realizing that you are absolutely defining every aspect of your experience. So the external locus of control could be that there are authorities administering and telling you how things should be done, perhaps. So that's something I've experienced to an extreme. Pushing back against that and saying, why do these people always need our details? Why do they always need to license everything and control everything? And the answers to these questions aren't really important. It's just the experience of pushing back, and I suppose the experience of pulling away as well, just walking away from it and going living in the woods, for example. Depersonalization Derealization Disorder may be prevented by connecting children who have been abused with professional mental health help. It's difficult to be a child in a society like this because you've come in from outside, from a place where there are literally no restrictions, no boundaries, no barriers. It's impossible for us to imagine that. And you've come to a place where all there is rules and borders and boundaries and regulations. Diagnosis is based on the self-reported experience of the person, followed by a clinical assessment. No laboratory test for depersonalization derealization disorder currently exists. Of course, you can't laboratory test for this. It's just a you know, a level of severity that you've got in certain metrics on a chart. What I'm saying is there's no such thing as depersonalization derealization disorder. It's just a label. Just like a spiritual awakening is just a label. The experience itself is everything. Suzanne Segal, who's a spiritual author, let's say, had an episode in her 20s that was diagnosed by several psychologists as depersonalization disorder, though Segal herself interpreted it through the lens of Buddhism as a spiritual experience, commonly known as Satori or Samadhi. So that's very interesting, and there's definitely some further reading for me there about, Satori and Samadhi. What it boils down to me is that you have to become your own guru. You have to become your own expert. There's no difference between going to a doctor and letting them decide what is wrong with you, or going to a spiritualist, a priest, to let them tell you what is wrong with you. And, I do listen to the medical side of things. I do listen to the spiritual side of things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be what resonates with me that I take on board. And it's not a familiar way of making sense of the world. A familiar way of making sense of the world is our parents told us how things were. Our teachers told us how things were. If we went to further education, it was our lecturers. Then we went into work and it was our bosses. It's always been people we look up to that tell us how things are. The expert culture is part of this outgoing age of Pisces, but the incoming age of Aquarius, it's all about figuring this stuff out for yourself. It's just about absorbing without judgment, and then the truth will arise from within. Thanks for watching.